So this is every Friday we do Talking Synths podcast. Today is Saturday, but we waited 24 hours to put this in with our Synthomania live stream. So this will technically be episode 6 of Talking Synths.
And this is a little piece of history too, because this is the first 100% live Talking Synths that we've done.
That's right. And instead of the showroom, we're doing this from Carlos's tech area. So there's
Keyboards
good
on
stuff
keyboards
everywhere.
on keyboards.
Yeah. So let's see. In the last episode, we talked about oscillators, and we went through a lot of oscillator basics, and we got into pulse width modulation and stuff. There was one thing I wanted to say that I forgot to, that it never really clicked with me until I kind of read it and figured it out. But oscillators are always oscillating.
Yeah.
When your keyboard is on, if you have a monophonic synthesizer, your oscillator is always oscillating, even when you're not playing a note. And so when you play a note, it just opens up the envelope generator, and lets the sound through. Yeah. But I always thought, okay, you play a note and the oscillator starts oscillating, but no, that's not the case. It's always going.
For me, it was a real big aha moment, and what I was actually doing was I was building a Dreadbox antiphon. And of course, I got 2 resistors flipped, and it blew a trace, and someone was kind enough to help me diagnose the problem, and they said, well, you need to put the oscilloscope on the pin of this op amp and look for a signal. And then that's when I realized the oscillators are always oscillating.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't mean anything, but that's probably just kind of cool to know. So we have a few comments and a few questions. One comment, Synth Wizards 10, when are we getting it?
It's in the works.
Synth Wizards 10 is so far along. The only problem is with the COVID stuff and all, with travel restrictions, we've not been able to finish it up because it requires us to travel. And so we're this close on it, and it's going to be a really cool episode, and it's got a lot of Lucas's camera work and stuff.
Yes,
so, I mean, our production values have really gone up with this one, so it'll be worth waiting for. I hope it's not too much longer a wait. Another interesting comment that we had, Russ Morgan wrote in and said, why would I choose a monophonic synth over a polyphonic synth? What are the general pros and cons? And what is it that makes monosynths still popular today? I thought that was a really interesting question, and when I read it, I thought, what is the answer to that? It takes a lot of thought.
Yeah.
I'll let you go first.
For me personally, the attractiveness of a monosynth is just the immediacy of it. You know, everything it's laid out and it's right in front of you. You have, depending, you know, you're going to have one VCA, maybe a handful of filters. But when you sweep that filter on a monosynth, it's instant. And when you're routing your mod matrix, everything is very apparent. Where polysynths, when I start to do sound design and I'm writing a song or something like that, it becomes a much more involved process. And I think monosynths just hit that nail on the head as far as productivity, instant gratification, and also sitting well in the mix.
Yeah. I guess the things I thought of were first of all, it's a lot cheaper. Like if you consider mini Moog versus memory Moog, and they say, well, a memory Moog is like 6 mini Moogs, and it is, and so it's about 6 times more expensive, or maybe not 6 times, but a lot more expensive. So the economy of it makes monophonic synths more desirable if you're on a budget in that way. Another thing is glissando or portamento.
Yeah.
You can do that on some polysynths, but then you got 6 or 8 voices all sweeping from out of nowhere. And if you're doing a lead line or a bass line and you want some glide on there, you always have just one note that you're gliding to, and it really sounds natural and all.
Much easier to shape those transients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was really fascinated by that question, because I'm sure there's a lot more to it than we're getting to, but I don't really know what the answer is. But monosynths seem to be punchier, more immediate. I don't know.
You know, one thing that I've had fun with lately is I have a Novation Nova desktop, and the way that you can configure it, it's really well thought out. It's really awesome. And so if I wanted to, I could hit unison and put an insane amount of oscillators in unison and make it act as a mono synth. But at a certain point, it becomes very hard to control and very muddy. So whether it be 1, 2, or 3 oscillators, there's a lot less hair to work with.
Yeah, well, think of the TB303. You know.
Yeah.
One oscillator, but it works so well. Yeah. Let's see.
Lucas has some questions.
All right. Incoming questions here. Another one. What maintenance should be done on older synths to keep them from breaking down? I'm going to let you start because you're the one that always does that here.
Well, you know, for me, and this is just overkill, but I like to get just eyes on everything. It's kind of like when you're gardening, they say the best fertilizer is the gardener's footsteps. Whenever I get a new piece of gear, I like to open it up, look at the power supply, and obviously capacitors. Mainly capacitors on the power supplies. I check for bulging caps, any leaking. But aside from that, also just general cleanliness. I keep a little air compressor by my workstation.
Deoxit.
A little bit of deoxit. Deoxit does have the tendency to kind of dry out those pots. So I use one that actually has a little bit of silicone lubricant in it. And the Korg products, they also have fader lube, which is really good for adding that nice silky smooth feel back to pots. How about you?
I guess what came to mind for me was keys that don't play. And you know, in older synthesizers, like the ones that use J-wires, like Mini Moog, for instance, if you don't play it for a long time, if it sits on the shelf or in your studio unplayed for 5 or 6 months, it's not going to play right when you start playing it because those bus bars and the J-wires have started to oxidize. So the best solution for that is just play it a while and it works that stuff off. In a more modern synth like the Super JX that you got on the bench there that uses the rubber contact strips, a lot of times those can get dirty. The carbon tends to become less conductive, so it may be at one point you got to take the key bed apart and clean those things or replace those contact strips.
Yeah. A good old-fashioned paintbrush, you know, 99 cents from Harbor Freight.
Yeah,
and just
keep the dust
keeping
off.
the dust off of it. I'm pretty particular when it comes to that as well.
Yeah. And we kind of touched on this episode or two ago about power that comes into your synthesizers. It's good to have 120 volt stable power because if you get some crazy power coming in, that can mess up power supplies and stuff. Great. Okay. What are some great vintage synthesizers that are less well known than Roland and Moog?
We've had this question multiple times, and then for me, I've always said Krumar. I'm a huge fan of the performer and the orchestrator. Honestly, right now, if I had the cash and I had to pick between a vintage polysynth, I'd go String Machine. You know, I'd get an orchestrator. I think they just have such rich, wonderful character.
Certainly Korg is one of those brands of vintage synths. Man, so many cool things like the Maxi Korg, and I mean, they made some ones that are really collectible.
I've had my eye out for the Korg Delta.
Oh yeah,
the Korg Delta, kind of a vintage string machine, and also I think older VAs are kind of really looked over. I love the flexibility of my Nova desktop, and it's kind of weird or funny to say that now. It's a vintage virtual analog.
Yeah, I've had people, you know, refer to DX7s and things like that as vintage, and I think, oh, no, wait a minute. If it's got anything digital, it can't be vintage. But that's not really true. I mean, a CR78 has some digital stuff, doesn't it? I mean,
909.
Yeah. I mean, at least to control it and that sort of stuff. Dave Karen, I think that's correct, says, being an organ lover, I would like you to talk about combo organs and your experience with those. Did you have them for repairs? And are those sounds that introduced you to deeper synth stuff? Dave, I'm sorry to say this, but I've never been a fan of combo organs. They always seemed kind of cheesy to me. So maybe they helped me jump straight over combo organs right into synthesizer sounds. Now I know some people love them and adore them, and we have Farfisa.
No, we have a Vox Jaguar.
Vox Jaguar, that we got playing the other day, and I heard it and I thought, Hey, I recognize that sound, and I wanted to come over and play some little classic
Yeah.
Vox and Farfisa lines on it. But okay, so I'm not totally against them, but I love synthesizers a lot more.
Yeah.
Did you ever deal with combo organs?
No, no, I haven't. But I guess for me, I've really been in a string machine kind of mood lately, and I know it's
I can
kind of
tell.
it's kind of the similar top-down, divide-down synthesis. It was really interesting seeing the inside of that Jaguar, and I was really surprised at how little
Yeah.
there was in there.
Yeah, it's like circuitry to make each of the
Top
12
12
notes,
notes.
and then you just divide them down, and that's about all you get.
Yeah.
So, tips on learning and buying synths. When is a good time to buy a new synth? If you had to choose only 3 types of synths, what would you choose?
Oh.
3 types.
Wait, mono, poly, and virtual analog. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
choose a Mini Moog, a Rhodes piano.
Yeah.
Oh man, there are so many that I love. I can't even start on what I would get. But buying a new synth, now is a good time to buy a new synth because everything we have in the showroom is on sale. And how do I say this? There's advertised pricing that we can, or there's pricing that we can advertise, and then you can also call for special pricing. So I would encourage anyone that's interested in anything in our showroom to call for special pricing or email because we have some really good deals going on during this event. So
Yeah,
our
definitely a
number
great time.
830-627-1530 or sales@syntaur.com. Tips on learning and buying synths.
Whew, I'll tell you, sometimes it's just a matter of getting your feet wet, and you're going to make some mistakes. I got overconfident in my abilities recently, and I purchased a synthesizer that I thought was going to be a good deal. I thought it was just going to need a little bit of repair, and it turned out to be a lot more involved than what I could do. So I think it's a matter of time,
But yeah, that brings up an interesting point. If you buy used gear, I've always felt this way. If I have a question about it, I just buy it, and if I don't like it, I figure I could sell it for what I bought it for,
Yeah.
or maybe make a little profit on it and tidy it up a little bit. But yeah, that's a good way to do it. Maybe you're out the shipping cost or something,
Yeah.
and then if you have local access to Syntaur or a place like Syntaur, go in and get some hands-on experience.
I personally, I follow a thread on Muff Wiggler, which is what new booty did you buy? And so I'm always interested to see other people's choices and what direction they're going. And
Yeah.
I'll even admit on eBay, I have a plethora of saved searches. So I get kind of daily updates, which doesn't help the gas, but I think it's as much information as you can take in. And
Yeah.
over time, you'll learn different things that'll be to your advantage.
All right, here's one. What are symptoms for fixing the famous Fizmo regulator problem? So the Ensoniq Fizmo, I don't know if you would have seen that yet or not, but if you haven't seen it yet in the rolls of synth stuff that we're showing, you'll see it coming up. I have a prototype Ensoniq Fizmo out there, and it's a really cool synthesizer. It got a bad rap when it came out because the demos on board were not really good, and I don't know, but it is a really cool synthesizer. And it's got one Achilles heel, and that's a voltage regulator that blows out on it. Is it a 7805 or 7815 or something, or a 5 volt or 15? I don't remember. But if you go to syntaur.com and click on Ensoniq in the list of brands, and then click on Fizmo, it'll take you to voltage regulators. Or it'll show all the parts we have for them, and they're in alphabetical order, so just scroll down all the way to the bottom to voltage regulators, and the one that we sell is what you want to replace yours with, because it's still a however many volt voltage regulator, I can't remember, but it's a lot beefier.
Yeah.
And the problem with the Ensoniq Fizmo is that regulator would get too hot, and then it was overtaxed.
Okay.
And so by replacing it with one that can handle a higher amp load, that solves the problem, and that is what we have on our website.
Nice. I know the Kurzweil K2500 kind of suffered from the same thing, and it was more so the position of components on the board. There's a diode that gets really hot and is very prone to failure. And I've seen one actually just kind of exploded. Yeah.
Not a pretty sight, huh?
No, it all starts with the power supply.
We got one comment on YouTube. Maybe this is in relation to buying a first synthesizer or whatever. And the guy says, buy it now because prices are going up, up, up. And boy, that's true. On one of the synth forums I'm on, people often talk about, this synthesizer is so expensive now. It used to be this. And my comment has always been, they're a good investment. And they're going to keep going up. And some people keep saying, the bubble's going to burst and this is the end of it. And they're still going up. I've been saying this for the last many years, and they're still just going up and up and up. Look at Jupiter 8 prices or whatever. So, yeah, if you're buying something collectible, man, don't hesitate. I think it's going to be a good investment.
Yeah, I've been after a Korg Trident for a little while, kind of their vintage string machine on steroids.
Yeah, those are cool.
And I'll look at old threads from the early 2000s, and it's like, oh, I wouldn't pay more than $500 for one of those. And
yeah,
it kind of makes my gut wrench a little bit. But it's also like they're not making anymore. They're just not.
And don't think about what they sold for back in year whatever. Think about, okay, if I buy this now for X dollars and decide to sell it 5 years from now, what's it going to be worth?
If it's properly maintained. Is the other
true.
Too.
Yeah. Hugh Johnson just bought a Korg Wave State. Good choice. I really like that thing. I think we opened, that was the first synthesizer we demoed, I think. I didn't see this whole thing, so I don't know what order things are going in, but the Wave State to me was really cool. And he says, what are the sounds in it good for? Man, to me that is such a soundtrack machine, such a cinematic, just huge animated sounds, and I just love that thing. So.
Yeah, I think the Wave State is definitely very interesting. It helped me to watch some online tutorials. I think its really strong suit is the multi-lane sequencing. And for me, there was it's a piano patch that's multi-sampled, but when you play it, it does these really interesting evolving rhythms behind it. And I instantly fell in love. And so now I'm kind of at the point where I need to see what they did. Like, okay, how did you get there? What was the process? But I've even seen really interesting percussive elements to it as well.
Yeah. Using
that sequencer to your advantage. So I'm really interested to get more hands-on time with it.
Yeah, I haven't spent a lot of time with it either, but any synthesizer that I sit down with and it just draws me in like that, like, oh, this one sound I can sit here and play for 20, 30 minutes, then that's a good sign to me. No matter what else it requires or what else is going on, if it just draws me in with that type of sounds, then it's a good one for me.
Yeah, and the fact that you have the joystick to your advantage too to get these.
Yeah.
I would really like to do some more reading on this vector envelope. So an envelope that not happens like a traditional ADSR, but actually is kind of like on a vector plane. Definitely a very interesting instrument.
Yeah. Korg is making some pretty cool stuff. Let's see. Korg is killing it on affordable synths. That's Mike Donaghy, I think, is who sent that. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Like the Wave State is $7.99. Is that right?
Well, even beyond that, I mean, I have a couple of Volcas just sit next to my bed, and
And what are those?
Them. I had
street price.
Like $199.
Yeah, that's insane.
The Volca drum, a physical modeling percussion synthesizer that fits in the palm of your hand, and you just throw some headphones on, and it's hours of fun. But then I also have the Volca modular, and the fact that you have the clock sync, and you can just literally let them do their thing. It's hours of fun.
Yeah. Okay, here's one for you. PPG Wave. What are your thoughts on repairing them? Even back in the day, they had hard to find, the parts for them were hard to find.
That's funny, because I was actually just talking to Sam about the PPG this morning. And we did have one that came through the doors, and it went to someone who was very knowledgeable. I've heard, I guess maybe something kind of contrary to that, that a lot of the parts are available because it's basically a computer, and that it used off-the-shelf parts, but I could be totally wrong. I haven't worked on one personally. I've had a really awesome time with the Quantum lately. So if I wanted something wavetable that was PPG-ish, I think I would just get the Quantum. Those analog filters sound wonderful, and it has all of the original PPG wavetables.
The keyboard feels a lot better.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, there's something to be said for the old,
The quality of the older DACs and just the architecture of it, and that cool
just
screen.
the way it makes you feel
Yeah.
when you're playing that. I mean, same thing with old cars. I go back to that a lot. You know,
Yeah.
some of them are clunky, and they, you know, it's a fight to drive them, but it's an experience and a good one.
Yeah, and I believe Junkie XL will have one up for sale here pretty soon. So I'll be interested to see when that happens.
The price just went up.
Yeah.
All right, this guy has a rare Roland SH3, not the 3A, the original 3. The keys are yellowed, and we talked last time, I think last podcast, about how to whiten these keys. And in fact, that information is on our website. If you go to syntaur.com, in the upper left of the menu bar, it says DIY help or something like that. So you can click on there. There's a list of topics, but one of those is how to whiten yellow keys. Should he yellow his, or should he whiten his, or should he leave the patina?
That's a personal choice, and also I will say that sometimes it's not going to get it back to that factory color. You know, there are some that are just too far gone,
but even if it doesn't, it gets closer.
Yeah, it'll get closer.
Yeah,
definitely.
If it were me, I think I would whiten it, just because I think it'd be so cool to have it, you know, looking like almost
Factory
new
fresh.
as possible. But that's just me. Let's see. Hugh Johnson has 2 Alesis Air Synths. One of them has several settings that just freak out. Is it repairable? I am not real familiar with the Alesis Air Synth, but usually when stuff freaks out, that is either a software issue or maybe a communication issue a lot of times, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know Alesis made these little tabletop, they were almost kind of like a Thurman effects box. So I don't know if that's the Alesis Air. It was around the same time as the Akira and other. They had some really interesting effects that they made. Just don't know which that exact Alesis model that one is.
But let's talk about just freaking out
Just
in general.
freaking out?
Like I had a buddy call me or email me just yesterday or the day before. He's got a SQ80, and after about 20 minutes, it freaks out.
Okay.
And we encounter that a lot on synthesizers, or certain synthesizers. That it's a hard problem to nail down.
I always go to faulty encoders is my first suspect when I start thinking of parameters jumping, and some encoders just after a length of time, it really doesn't take much.
Yeah.
And then values will jump all over.
That's true. If you have it set to this, and sometimes that can be a dirty pot too.
Yeah.
Where you got it. Well, the Ensoniq, a lot of the Ensoniq stuff would do this, where it has a data slider. And so if you have your parameter set to where that slider is adjusting the tuning, for instance, you'll be playing along and all of a sudden you're in another key because the pot is dirty and just jumped values. So so that could be a thing.
I was trying to remember if the Alesis Air was that desktop module that you would control with your hand. So if that was the case, maybe the photocell or whatever is actually reading that information could be on its way out.
Yeah, on that kind of problem, what I say is the best way to do it is just start swapping out different sections of it, swapping out the main board, swapping out this or that, which we have the luxury to do here because we usually have stuff to swap out, but I know that's not good advice for someone at home.
Yeah, you could always throw the multimeter on it, check resistance, and if the values are jumping all over the place, that would be a good indication that you have a faulty part.
But sometimes just reseating, unplugging and reseating ribbon cables and that sort of stuff can help.
Deoxit.
Yeah. Let's see. We also had a question about cleaning contact boards and the rubber contact strips. And I guess we sort of touched on that with the maintenance question. But what are the good ways if you have, say, the regular couple of contact PCBs underneath with the rubber contact strips on top?
Yeah, the PCBs I usually just blow off with a air compressor. That's not absolutely necessary. I usually then follow that up with a terry cloth with 70% isopropyl. Wipe it clean. The rubber contact strips you can clean with warm water and soap. You want to use a very minimal amount of soap because any type of residue that's left on there will have a negative effect. But as long as you give it a good rinse, just let it air dry. That's generally the safest way. You want to try to keep rubbing alcohol off of the actual rubber contact strip itself, but you can take a Q-tip and kind of hit those little carbon tracks just independently.
Yeah, the little nubs.
And then also, if you have a contact that's starting to fail, you'll be able to see. You can kind of look at it and compare it to the other ones. It kind of usually has like a shiny reflective surface.
And there's also the old trick of, on a lot of the Korg, like some of the vintage Korg things, Poly 61, Poly 800, I think Memory Moog used the same key bed. A lot of times if there's a dead key, you can cut a tiny little square out of a cereal box, tape it onto the plastic key on the part that presses down on the contact strip, and just that extra little width on there does the difference and makes that note play. So at this point, it's time to move on. I guess we'll bid you modulator.